Good afternoon from the Kingston Chamber of Commerce and the webinar on IT and how to protect yourselves working online. As many of you discovered, we're all now working from home, and although some of us will be continuing to work a little bit later online, some of the IT securities and functions may not be what they should be. Sadly, there are far too many scams and some very realistic scams which are exploiting a lot of people for businesses and actually on their own personal platforms. So we really do need to manage ourselves very carefully when it comes to our IT housekeeping. So I'm delighted to have today Kat and Paul from IQ in IT. And for those who aren't familiar, Kat and Paul are chamber patrons, and they've been incredibly loyal and active chamber members to a lot of businesses, helping many to get wired up and secured for business. So they're going to share a number of top tips, and I think there's going to be plenty which we can take away and learn and try and apply at home. So first of all, I'd like to welcome Paul and Kat. Kat, would you like to say a quick few words of hello, and then I'll pass you on to Paul. Kat.
Yep. So welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you this afternoon. And what we have for you is a lot of interesting tips and tricks and things which will hopefully help you with continuing to work from home and stay safe in the physical as well as cyberspace.
Thank you, Kat. Paul, introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Forbes. I'm with IQ in IT, and I'm part of the team, and I have specialist skill sets like I'm a certified ethical hacker. I've been in business and run businesses for many years, and really this is a reflection of what we're seeing through these tips of what we have put from a practical knowledge point of view, not just kind of book reading, if you know what I mean, and what should be the way and best practices. This is real life. You should be able to take something away from this, hopefully.
Did you just say you're a certifiable hacker?
Certified ethical hacker, yeah. Yeah.
Never knew that. Well, good.
That's why the EC Council is one of the things at IQ is we try and the actual security industry is not super well regulated, and there's a lot of people out there that are very, very intelligent that literally have zero qualifications, and there's been an attempt along the way to do so. There's a really good one that we're always ongoing, even in our Windows and our servers. We're always trying to upskill ourselves constantly, because IT, like any sort of business, is a moving beast. So I've got another exam coming up soon, which I'm not looking forward to, but that'll be an interesting one. So yeah, we're always, Kat always pushes all of us to do more and more training, really, all the time.
Yes, I'm sure she does that very, very well. Okay, so what we're going to do is that there's three kind of key areas which Kat and Paul are going to run through for us. The first item is called a summary of the security release from HMRC, which was released last week. Then they're going to go through 10 simple security tips to help us in working from home. And then finally, there's going to be a question, and they're just going to help how they can help you with lowering your licensing fees for furloughed staff, and then they'll be taking some questions near to the end. So I think, Paul, do you want to quickly just summarise the security issues which HMRC released last week for us?
Yeah, sure. It sort of ties in nicely to the 25th of April COVID briefing, really, where Lynn Owens from the National Crime Agency actually did a little statement, and they were sort of updating on crime generally from what was going on with cocaine and things like that, but specifically cyber. And the crime agency, together with the Greater London City Police, in this time over COVID, based on COVID, have actually stopped over 2,000 sites and actually taken down 2,000 sites based on fake online shops, phishing sites where they are built so they are grab credentials, and also malware distribution, so things that get on your machine that's very, very nasty. So it's important in this sort of what is dark times to, you know, take a positive mindset, and I'm sure a lot of businesses are, where they're re-looking at sales and marketing, they're re-looking at how to structure their business. Maybe they're making it more, work from home and virtual. And one of those things we need to look at really is the security element. And HMRC have released a document, which we'll get to, I think, in another slide's time as an outline. But that is their attempt at helping businesses try to navigate how to make themselves secure. And on the surface, when you have that conversation, it's quite a daunting conversation. There's lots of other priorities to think about within the business to do. And if we move on to the next slide, where we can see the actual HMRC list, you'll see that they have done a fantastic list, which is very, very long and very, very comprehensive. And the great thing about this is it's obviously been written by what you'd expect, a very good high-level person to sort of get you as a business asking your provider questions on how secure are we, how do we get secure, and it tries to give you an idea of what questions to ask. I think the con sort of with this, and there's no slide on them because it's a big topic, is that there's so much information here. It's hard to know as a business owner if they're good answers or what you need. So I would definitely sort of take time to go through this at some point and look at some of these. And if some of these stand out to you, or you have a look at them, or even some of the things you don't understand and you want more clarity on them, please feel free to get in touch. But we felt this was quite hard to digest straight away, especially if you're, moving all of a sudden to putting people in home to work and things like that. So we've sort of come up with 10 tips that we feel would be great cyber hygiene for the business, which is effectively what you're trying to do. You're trying to get secure. I mean, what did you kind of make of it, Forbes, when you sort of first saw this list before we get to Kat?
There's a few bits in there which I think as a layman I could understand, but it really is marketed and targeted to people like yourselves, and to people who are sort of in-house IT. Yes. I think to a layman like me, I'd say out of the 50 questions that I would say maximum 3, which I actually understood the language as well as the purpose. But I think we went through this a little bit yesterday. I think there's a lot of good points. Your top tips do kind of cover a lot of these areas from our conversation. So I think it's good that you've managed to distill this whole document into your 10 points. So I think that's great.
One slide I just want to touch on before we go on to that. So if we go on to the next slide, I just want to make everyone aware, as moving forward, there is a difference between IT support and IT security. There is an overlap where obviously good cyber hygiene comes in, but an IT security team would be very much focused with a different mandate, monitoring logs, scanning things like that. And that's obviously at a higher level, more users, more larger businesses. But even at a smaller level, good security does come in that middle spot. Whereas like IT support is more about usability, getting something out there quick. And that's going to become relevant when we get to another slide in a minute. Cyber Essentials is just something I want to touch on, because that is an attempt by the government and GCHQ to help a business understand what structure they should employ for them. So Cyber Essentials is a certification you can go through. It's a self-certification to just check you've got all, have you enabled one of the tips, for example, in a minute. And the Cyber Essentials Plus is just a bit further, where it goes and actually tests that. So it will scan your assets to make sure they're safe. And I want to hand over to Kat just quickly on the ISO 27001, because that's something that IQ and IT is accredited with. And Kat has actually run through lots of businesses to help them get the ISO. So if you just want to touch on that quickly, Kat, to know for future things what people can do.
Thank you. Yes, so we've helped many of our clients to go through ISO 27001. And IQ IT ourselves, we are ISO 27001 certified. That means that we meet the criteria and that we really look after all the security. And what it basically is, it's similar to the Cyber Essential Plus. However, it has some differences in terms of how it's done. But the basic core of it is basically the security and all of the sort of main areas being met. Cyber Essentials, I would say that should really be mandatory for any business to make sure that no matter if you go to your local shop or your local garage, or if you're getting your internet from a local supplier or a national supplier, you know that they are meeting the basic requirements.
That's coming up a lot more in tenders as well. People are asking for those, which is a driver.
Yeah, it shouldn't really be down to waiting for someone else to push you towards having to have the security in place. It's always best if you can tell your clients that they can rest assured that you will look after their personal data, and they'll be much happier to choose you as a supplier.
Okay, good.
So we were aware that we'd have quite a diverse audience in terms of maybe one-man bands to larger groups of users. So we wanted to try and cover these tips for all of those. So these are basic cyber hygiene tips to think about and consider. We've put this on as a sort of basis to think, you know, what are you using? So, I mean, all of a sudden businesses, we saw a lot of businesses that had some people that didn't really have a home working model, and all of a sudden they were thrown into home working, and they've had to use, you know, different software and setups around what they were currently using. So you might be familiar with someone or some software called TeamViewer, where it allows you to remote to a machine, or some file sync and share services like Dropbox, OneDrive, or Google Drive. A lot of people are familiar with that. You might be a slightly larger organization, slightly more mature in your technology. So you use something called remote desktop, which you might recognize the bottom left-hand icon. And also, I mean, it's been going that way anyway for SaaS applications. So something like Xero, for example, is accounts, and that can be accessed from, you know, any machine securely. You might also be utilizing a VPN to connect. So any of these kind of structures you're probably utilizing in a business that you're collaborating with. And we wanted to kind of anchor some of the points onto that to kind of secure these, because one of the things that some of these might incur for some businesses is something called, in the trade, called shadow IT, where you might have a user who's a sort of a good enthusiast in a user base, all of a sudden goes, oh, I know, I like, you know, Dropbox, and they're all forced to work at home, and then all of a sudden you've got data essentially being set up and shared by, you know, Dropbox to the machines that you have no control on. And that's the sort of shadow IT that, even before this situation, was very, very problematic. And because of the situation, would have been brought more into the forefront of, you know, the user necessity of just sharing documents. So I do want to just let people know at this point that if you're worried about what structure you have chosen as your business to share it across your user base, then by all means get in touch with us for complimentary, and we can just have a chat with you and just make sure you're using the right thing to make sure you are as secure as you can be within that particular environment without implementing lots and lots of change. So that's where we wanted to anchor the next tips, because all of these tips are relevant for anything within that.
Thank you, Paul. No, it's a good place to start. And there were a couple of acronyms which have been used, which, as we get to the relevant top tips, I will probably kind of ask you to explain them just a little bit more. I think just one of the overall, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, is that people often think just because they're working from home and they're not necessarily in a public space, that actually home is actually pretty secure. But I think really from listening to what you were saying yesterday, just really don't take that for granted. Just because you think you've got your own home set up neatly and it works, but that doesn't necessarily give you any added protection. And I think we'll kind of come across that issue a little bit later on as we go through these top tips. So can we start with the first one then? System and application updates.
Yeah, so it doesn't almost sound that delivers with a big bang, but this is something that as a basic cyber hygiene you should be doing as a machine. Now everyone's seen the system updates, some people have even got annoyed with system updates, and for getting any features and functionality of a new update to say Office or Windows, one of the big portion of what they do when that update is released is security features. So we all remember the NHS situation, or it wasn't just the NHS, but the NHS was hit when the encryption software leaked across the internet. So what effectively it did, any machine that was connected to the internet could be scanned, and then some code could be injected on that machine, and it encrypted the entire machine and no one could do anything. Now, what that protects against is not something as bad as what they call a 0-day, but any security issues that may come up. So, you know, at some point someone will get phished. You know, you will click on something, you will go to a website that, you know, could potentially try and infect your machine. And, you know, making sure your Mac updates are done or your Windows updates are done, anything like that is absolutely key. Essentially what it would do is just make sure for like a 10-15 minute job, really check off a massive box to make sure, you know, you are in a really good position. So it's important to know. Go on, Forbes.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think people assume that if there's an update of something, that it's maybe to make your program run smoother or to take out any gremlins. They may not necessarily associate an update with actually a security update.
Yes. I mean, I want to hand over to Kat at this point, because obviously as a service provider, we handle updates in a certain way with our clients. So if you've got any users out there or yourself, just make sure you send in them a note, make sure you do your updates, you know, because you'll be surprised how many machines have come to us that, you know, are not in an updated state and have had problems from that. So if I hand over to Kat quickly, and she can just sort of talk about how we handle updates to clients.
So as a managed service provider, we are managing clients' updates for them. So what we tend to do is delay them a few days, because there is also a possibility of a faulty update causing issues. So we test them first before we release them, and then we manage the time of a day installation for our clients, for depending what their work week looks like. Some work at the weekend, so they might be less busy during the week. And obviously we had this huge update, which was Windows 7 being decommissioned in January. And that means a lot of people are still having Windows 7 machines. Surprisingly, some people still have Windows XP, which has been gone for a very long time. So it's normally people don't quite understand, they don't realize what it means not getting security updates and the risks they're putting themselves in, but also everyone else on their network, which obviously comes to working from home. If people are working from Windows 7 machines, they are potentially increasing the risk to their businesses if they get compromised.
Thank you, Kat. Shall we move on to the next top tip? And this isn't somebody swearing. Use 2FA on everything. Paul, yeah. This isn't a swear word in Mac, no, in IT terms, is it?
Not, unfortunately, although I think some IT people feel if it hasn't been done, it is a swear word. It is probably one of the most crucial things you can take away, and it does mean that you sort of just have to diligently go through your account. So what is 2FA? 2FA is a second factor of authentication, if you didn't know that. You probably heard of it because a lot of people bang on about it. So your first factor authentication is usually your password. So that's something that you put in, and then it's something you have. Now that can be done on any of those models that you've just seen. So if you've got a user base that has suddenly rolled out, you know, Dropbox, all right, you may not be able to force them because you don't have management controls for 2FA, but you tell them to go and switch 2FA on. If you are on a more complex solution like a remote desktop where you've got a larger user base, then you can implement software that will give you that two-factor. So most of the time it's completely free. You can do it through an authentication app, you can do it through SMS, you can do it through additional software based on the requirement. But I would take that into your personal lives as well, looking at things like Facebook, Instagram. We were talking to a customer about coming onto our services just before the world went into 28 days later. And one of their drivers was they'd been phished. So someone had sent them essentially a mail, and that it had been accessed, and they had given over their password. And it's actually reasonably easy to sort of acquire a password through automation or trying. And what I think broke their back on their current provider was that even though they got phished, they then didn't implement two-factor authentication, which is completely free. They then got phished again, literally within a week, and if they had done two-factor and also something else called conditional access, which is for another day, but if they'd just done two-factor, if that user had clicked on that link, then they would not have been compromised again. And they were a reasonably, decent sized business that should have implemented something like that. So the thing to take away is it doesn't cost the business money, unless obviously there's a very complex solution as a large company you're running, and then it's not expensive to do. But most people, you can roll this out for free. Just go into your security settings on anything from Zero, from Instagram, from Facebook, and it will walk you through that. So that's over to you. So it's not a swear word, Forbes. So I don't know what you. No,
it is. What's interesting in my line of work outside of the chamber, one of my large kind of Dropbox equivalents, it's called WeTransfer, have only in the last month have actually started putting in a 2FA kind of code message into it. And it certainly helps when your provider in that particular circumstance does that for you. But I think it's also, I mean, we kind of dip backwards and forwards a little bit between business, but also private, because they do so intertwined. But I think it's this good practice throughout. And the 2FA, as I said, I think it's one of the most essential elements out of today that you probably encourage everybody to actually look at, and if they're not sure, is to come to you to get advice.
We had someone that didn't have a phone at one point, didn't we, Kat?
What we use a lot for our clients, dual two-factor. So this is a paid service, makes it a lot easier for people to connect and sort of have the two-factor in place. It also allows us to have the two-factor managed for our clients. So it means we can reset it, we can move it across to a new phone easily. So all it takes us to send a text message to the new phone for the user, and then they're all enrolled and ready to continue. So there's obviously a usability and a sort of security trade-off in terms of, it will take you potentially sort of 10-15 seconds to log on, but it's a definitely worth trade-off to do to protect you from cyber hacking.
Which probably leads us quite nicely now into the top tip number 3, password audit and software. So who wants to lead on this one? Kat?
So I'm happy to continue onto the password audit and software.
Yep.
Not everyone might be aware, but if you log into a lot of your applications and systems, you'll be able to review and see where you last logged in from, or what device is connected to this account. So things like logging into your Gmail or logging into your Office 365 or other sort of services. You can go into security settings, you can review, and sort of you should do that on a regular basis to know that there isn't anything going on. So for example, one of my colleagues, Netflix, a few months ago has been sort of used from a location he didn't recognize. and because you're sharing it with a family member, he sort of, first of all, disabled the Netflix and reset passwords, and then inquired to find out that actually the member of the family was so nice and passed it on to another member of family outside the family circle. So it's important to sort of react to things you don't recognize, because it could have been someone who just stole the password. It could have been that there wasn't a two-factor implemented. But even if you have two-factor, there are ways to still breach that, but it's very, very, very difficult to get someone's password. It's if you get the person not at the right time, it will take a couple of minutes, and you have the password, you can log in. If you have two-factor, I would say phishing a password from 1 to 100 would be probably a difficulty number 2. Breaching 2FA, I would say, would be somewhere in the 80s or higher. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, it's I mean, with this sort of stuff, we're talking some very basic cyber hygiene things here, but you know, you do have to look at what we call in the trade your threat model. And you know, for most small enterprises, they're going to be automated attacks. So you know, they're going to be sort of scattergun approaches. Like Kat says, it's, you know, nothing is, you know, impenetrable with time. And you know, if it was like a financial institution, for example, they could put more effort into, you know, breaking the code on a 2FA. But that's not something that I think a lot of smaller enterprises need to kind of, you know, be concerned about. But from the point of view of a password audit and a software, you know, the password audit and software we want to mention is something called LastPass. LastPass basically allows you to, because you've got so many services now, from, you know, personal ones that are all internet connected, and you know, there's guidance out there from the National Crime Agency and GCHQ about how you should set your passwords. You know, there's a set of 3 or 4 randomly paced words, you know, with a few other criteria in it. And the reason they set that is because it's harder to break from what's called a dictionary attack. So there's more entropy if a machine's trying lots and lots of codes. And you've also got to be aware from a password audit about reused passwords, because reused passwords, if you're, let's say you use a password on LinkedIn, which had a breach, then you will have that out on the web somewhere from your company email address. A lot of people then suddenly change it from Arsenal to Arsenal1. Again, there's software that allows people to put in common mutations. So that's why they've gone for this sort of thing. But the idea of password software is, you know, you can't retain all these passwords now. There's too many. So this helps you create very secure and complex passwords, which are very hard to break, and have, you know, if you had 100 sites, have 100 different complex passwords. So you're really, really securing yourself. And the password audit is done within that software, because it tells you if you're reusing stuff. If you're in a larger organization, then someone can hook up what's called, if the larger one's listening, like their Active Directory, to kind of sync and look at if any of their passwords are on big dictionaries that are out there of all the leaked passwords. So I think when we ran through this point, Forbes, before, using LastPass, which is an application, I you know, anyone listening to this, go look up LastPass, you know, even a YouTube video of it for a second and try it out. There is a free version. But you know, you had a sort of a few questions on this, didn't you, Forbes? I
mean, I'm of a certain generation. You forget what your last password was anyway, so it's kind of quite good to keep kind of a nice kind of wallet where they're all stored. But it was just the understanding that generally you sort of said, don't put together all your passwords, and in a sense that's what LastPass does. But my question yesterday was, well, how secure is LastPass? And you actually gave kind of a good description and breakdown of why it does work. how it is secure.
So basically, what happens with LastPass, and obviously there's lots of different applications. So LastPass is one of the ones which does it in a very secure way, where all your passwords are stored on your local computer, and before they get transmitted to the central server, they get encrypted. And with the current sort of technology, to unencrypt or break the encryption on that would probably take the existence of the planet or the universe. I'm not quite sure which one is it, Paul. So very, very, very long time with the current technology it would take to break it. Obviously, as technology moves on, it's always important to stay with the technology and make sure that the provider you are using is keeping up with it and is updating and increasing the encryption so it stays secure.
But I think really it goes back to what you said, Paul, is that if, say, for example, on Amazon, your password there was picked up, that actually the likelihood is that you probably use that same password or a variation of it on your Facebook, on your Skype, and all these different areas. And so it's actually a lot easier for people to just unpick it from one social media strand or something like Amazon. So actually the LastPass is a very neat way of putting in different passwords. You know it's secure and you can forget about it.
Yeah, I mean, it really is that sort of thing that kind of remembering a password eats from your personal life into your business life a bit, really. You know, it's that crossover because we're so connected now with the devices. So yeah, it's probably one of the most helpful things that are out there at the minute. Just remember to put 2FA on it. But you know, if you were a large business, just to make you aware, if you were a large business and someone's doing the first stage of an attack, if it wasn't automated, you know, so they're just seeing if what servers connected on the internet and what they can do to compromise a number of servers, and you're just in that pool, is something called open source intelligence. And you will be able to see, you know, get a good idea of how many people are in the business, what sort of equipment they use, and then you would run that off some software that basically goes and pulls lists of compromised passwords and accounts, even if they're sort of, you know, so it is something that is a genuine you need to look at, really, and push all your staff, even if you don't have control, to say, you know, can you use LastPass or, you know, test another equivalent to really get that out there and make sure everyone's sort of practicing good cyber hygiene.
I think it's a very strong point to make. No, okay. Can we move on to top tip number 4, provision / check of security protection, or does that a little bit capture what we've been talking about with LastPass?
It does, but it's more about, this one is more about, you know, if you're forced to work at home now and, you know, maybe you've given machines to your staff, or maybe they have their own machines, going back to some real basic stuff that you can check immediately, which is, you know, antivirus, which is, again, something that we see so many times, which is, well, antivirus is the tip, yeah, but it can really, really save you. And you'll be surprised how many machines we've come across that might have an antivirus on, but it's completely out of date and not working or reporting because of a subscription or something like that. So, you know, as you're kind of compiling this sort of short checklist for a team or for your own guys, this is something like, can you just let me know if it was like home machines, you know, what antivirus are you using and is it up to date? Because it doesn't take much to do a few clicks to get it there, really, in theory. And I'll probably hand over to Kat at this point just to say how, as a provider for users, we manage like antivirus and things like that.
So again, similar to what we do with 2-factor, we manage antivirus on our clients' computers. So that means they don't have to worry about checking if it has run, if it's got any issues and stuff like that. We deal with it. We get tickets logged in our system automatically, and we have proactive engineers looking at it and working through these alerts and and making sure everything is nice and secure. And obviously that also makes it easier for us because it lowers the amount of requests we get from clients. So we are not waiting for a fire on the roof. We are putting the fire out while it's at the base.
Always good to keep the fires to a minimum, Kat.
Yeah.
Okay, conscious of the time, so here's one of our first lovely little acronyms that we talked about yesterday. Provide your people with VPN access. Paul, before we start on that, VPN, what does it mean?
Yeah, I think some might be familiar with it, some might not, some might have heard of it, but it's a virtual private network. And essentially what it does is, for the people that don't know, is it creates a secure link of communication between one point or device to another. So if, for example, you were out in a cafe and you're connected to the wireless, you are connected and your machine is connected. And essentially when you're passing traffic to and from, it can be kind of, intercepted and looked at. And so one, it protects against the traffic like that, so it creates that link between, but it also manages a point-to-point element. So if you were securely talking back to a business server or another service, I'll probably hand over to Kat to sort of talk about some of the ones we've had to implement for some clients, and I hope that sort of is a good basic explanation of it for us.
No, it's good. Good, Kat, your thoughts?
Yeah. So what we have been doing, we have been working with our clients since about mid-February, preparing them for the lockdown. Obviously, some have been welcoming it and have been working with us closely on making sure that all of their staff have either their own computers or that we source more computers. So we have ended up getting computers from different clients who didn't need them to the clients who need them. There's a huge shortage of computers, laptops, webcams, headsets, as everybody has gone into different suppliers and sourced them, and obviously that's leading into issues. So what we've been doing is setting up our clients with their own computers, so they use a VPN to dial into their office, and then they connect to their office computer to keep it more secure. The ones who have company computers, either laptops or have taken their office computers home, we have set up VPNs for them, and they work the same way as if they were in the office. Obviously, what is crucial is that the office has a decent internet. So normally internet has, normal broadband have higher downloads and slower uploads. If it's a standard broadband and if it's not very good, the upload speed will be very low, and it will cause issues if the entire office has to work from home. So what we've done for one of our clients is basically move all of their equipment into our office, and it's currently running on our meeting table because their internet wasn't good enough to cope with all of them working from home. So they've already had working from home for one or two people already, but entire office working from home just was not good enough, and we had to make a very quick decision and do it over the weekend to allow them to continue working during the lockdown, as they are one of the businesses who actually still have a lot of work to be getting on with.
Good for them. That's good. Okay, just moving on. Number 6 was home Wi-Fi router checks. If we can quickly go through this, because the next one is a big golden one. So if we can quickly go through the home Wi-Fi, that'd be good.
Yeah, I think I'll just sort of go through this. There was more to say on it, but I think, if all of a sudden people are at home and you haven't maybe had some deeper thought into how that would work from a security point of view, just be mindful of asking your guys and team about what their home Wi-Fi is, because how old is their router might be an indication of, is it good enough? Has it been updated? We've had in businesses, for example, that have just gone and bought little plugs that go in the wall, for the Wi-Fi to extend it. You know, all of a sudden they plug it in and they've not really configured it and it's open. So, you know, it's just another way in. So I want to encourage people just to, without prying too much, just get an understanding of what, you know, if you are passing data to a home user and you've been sort of thrown into this, just sort of be mindful that, you know, make sure they have updated their router, make sure there's a decent password on it. Ask them, you know, what does it say on the encryption for its connection. There are some which are obsolete now, which is an encryption is very, very easy to break with some sort of automated software. You don't have to have a super high skill level to do it. So yeah, just make sure, you know, if anyone's sort of plugging in those little Wi-Fi points for that ease of use, you know, have they made sure they can set it up. And again, if they are doing something like that, that's where it comes back to something like VPN access, because if they are connecting to, like you say, Forbes, they feel more safe at home, almost their guard is lowered, almost, you know, just to make sure that you've got things like that. And with VPN access, you can purchase software VPNs which will allow you to encrypt tunnels and things like that with not huge configuration required. So it can kind of protect that traffic if you did connect to, say, like the home thing. So that's just something, you know, again, when you're asking your team, just doing a diligency check on things, something to ask and something to think about.
Thank you. The next one, well, I suspect this one has some kind of importance because you've used the same phrase 3 times over. Backup, backup, backup. It does what it it does what it does on the label, says on the label, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
I mean, this one is super important from a security point of view and a usability point of view. When all these, if we think about that first slide about what people might be using, if you've been thrown into this situation from a usability point of view, and then all of a sudden, you know, you're using software that maybe you weren't using before, like Dropbox and things like that, you can, like you would imagine, through common sense, get caught short. You know, deleted files, literally revisions, things like this. And then from a security point of view, it's massive because, you know, what do you need to back up? Is it a whole machine? Is it a database? Is it all this sort of stuff? Are you know, connecting? So you really have to look at, are our backups good enough at the minute? Because I think there was some staggering statistic that they released about it was something like 48% of UK small businesses had been targeted, not quite sure how they pulled the statistic, for ransomware attacks. And of those that get caught, there's about 78% that end up paying to actually release the data, you know, to be decrypted. And if you're not familiar with that, what it is a file will get on your machine, you will run it unknowingly perhaps, and then it will scramble all the data that you can't actually open it and read it, and then it comes up and says, we have your key to your files, pay up. And, you know, if that, clearly that 78% didn't have backups in place, or maybe going back to number one, have done the software updates, you know, or have a decent antivirus provision.
Just assumed it was doing it.
Exactly. So just taking the diligence to check is super, super important. So backup is not only so important from that security point of view, backing up of logs, what actually happened, but actually being thrust into this work from home situation means that, you know, you really should, you know, focus on, spend a bit of time just focusing, is my backup of my data safe and is it being run? And I can let Kat just quickly talk about how we manage backups as a provider quickly.
So again, we manage backups centrally for our clients. So we back up servers. If they have servers, we back up Office 365 or SharePoint. And we also have an offer for 2 months free backup for SharePoint and Office 365. If anyone's interested, please contact us at the end of this session. So we're managing it centrally. If we get a phone call from our clients and they say, oh, I've accidentally deleted a file, our engineers are able to really quickly recover the deleted file. We have certain amount of different kind of backups in place, so we can do restores very quickly. And obviously, we test our clients' backups because the backup is only as good as the last time it has been checked, because a lot of people will go by receiving an email or a notification saying backup has been successful, not noticing that they've actually not selected any files to be backed up. So backup. It's everything else.
It's heartbreaking if it's not been done properly. I mean, you can, let alone financially, but ours, in terms of paying some horrible ransom, but the amount of hours that you've lost because you've just assumed it was backing up, it's, as you said, it's up there as one of the golden rules. Moving on, number 8, use an MDM solution where you can, which this isn't something you get from B&Q, is it? MDM.
No. So MDM is mobile device management. So that covers any computers, any mobile devices users may use, and it will work on corporate or personal devices. It will separate the business part on the personal devices. So it keeps all of that in its own little bubble. If the user leaves, just the corporate side of the data gets wiped. If the phone gets lost, the same, it gets wiped. It enforces encryption and just make sure that the phone is up to date or the computer is up to date and meeting all of the compliance. I'm sure that you love that, Forbes, don't you?
I absolutely, yes, love it. But listening to you yesterday, it's, I mean, there is so much more that we're now doing on our handhelds, our phones and everything else, that actually there's a danger that we think all of this just regarding laptops, but actually the phones, it could be a business's Achilles heel if the security isn't good on that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you can go away after this and just go and check, you know, your updates, implement 2FA relatively quickly. And MDM is something you can implement very, very quickly, but you do need to look at, you know, what are your options. So for example, Office 365, they're pushing MDM solution, but it's becoming so prevalent. Microsoft bundling it into a lot of their packages now. And essentially, if you think about it, if you're familiar with BYOD, which is bring your own device, so if you're giving your users emails on their personal phone, if you're allowing them file shares on their personal phone, technically you're passing corporate data on a device that you have no control sets on. And mobile device management goes a bit more beyond mobiles now. It's going into the desktop arena and, you know, general control of data going onto a device to give you that control. And it's that perfect meld of, you don't have to buy them a phone, they can use their own phone, but it will separate off and control, like Kat says, a bubble, all your corporate data. So, you know, if you're sort of, you know, a larger user base, you definitely need to really start thinking about that, because you need to think, where is my data going? And, you know, I don't need to bring up GDPR at this point because everyone's like, you know, just thinking of COVID and etc. But it is definitely something that should get on your agenda, and maybe some of your licensing actually allows that, but you haven't implemented yet, so it'd be quite easy to do. So it's something to definitely think about and just look into.
No, it's a fascinating area, and I think it's an area which most of us, I mean, I don't because I've got you guys, but I think a lot of people kind of switch off regarding their sort of the mobile device and how that should be secure. Yeah. Moving a little bit on to number 9, provide basic security training.
So again, we provide our clients with security training. It's very important because security is not a piece of hardware or software which gets put into the office and there everything is secure. Security is a responsibility of every single person, from the director all the way down to the cleaner, who might just leave the doors open or not set the alarm, or just pass a letter or a package to someone who just comes in and says, oh yeah, I've been told to come and collect this. sort of thing. So we have seen this, and we work with clients who sort of actively go and do sort of private investigations. And these are the sort of social engineering tricks they will use at sort of staff which are more vulnerable, who might not be included as in the sort of training or running of the company. So it's very, very important. And obviously with lots of staff being furloughed, they can still do training. We are able to offer 30 days free training for staff. So if you want to get in contact with us afterwards, please feel free, and we can help you out, because all we need to do at the moment is all pull together and support each other through this difficult time. So once we come out of it, we are all stronger and can build better businesses and stronger businesses.
Very, very true.
I would say, like, it is definitely one of the ongoing things that's so powerful, because right now a lot of these attacks that are coming through are, you know, based on people's fears. So emails coming in, and what, you know, based on what happens if you lose your job, or HMRC guidance on this and that. And as you can imagine, someone who's fearing that is more likely to click, as an example of that style of attack. So providing ongoing security training to monitor, like, was that how to spot an email if it's fake, and things like that is really, really powerful and needs to be integrated, because, you know, nothing's impenetrable, and use your team as part of that security for your business, you know, because quite a lot of the time they'll be also the ones that open up the door, and, you know, unknowingly or by accident. I would like to just point out, if you've got some kids out there for training, there is a government site called thinkyouKnow.co.uk, and it's sort of very handy kind of to look at. I haven't gone through it in depth myself, but the idea is it can help you inform people of different ages without scaring them about when they might be being manipulated for things. And so it's very it's a good site to kind of just go on and just have a look, because it might help you, you know, if you've got kids at home at the minute in the COVID life. Like, I don't know if you can see my lovely tattoo my little girl gave me this morning, part of the COVID life.
Beautiful.
Yeah. You know, it's really worth also kind of at some point, maybe not now, is just having a look at that, and it will really help you navigate the right words without sort of instilling fear and not, you know, making them move forward and do things. But yeah, security training is so important for your business user base. And even out of this, without things like, you know, free stuff or complimentary stuff, it's something that should be looked at ongoing, because it could save you a lot of problems in the future.
Right, good. Number 10, develop contingency plans. I think from yesterday, our conversation, this is really kind of the big wraparound for everything which you've put together here, isn't it?
Yeah.
In terms of, I mean, we talked about yesterday about sort of what would be your main 3 steps. Is it right to kind of just kind of go through those 3 steps, or is something further you would like to say on the contingency plans bit first?
To integrate, put this into the 3 steps, but develop contingency plans really is take the time now, even if it's half an hour in your diary, to kind of just do, you know, you're probably taking the time of like re-reviewing budgets, looking at maybe sales and marketing, how we can push forward. Add a bit of diary time to just check what underpins everyone's business, which is the IT, and check that, you know, the security. And you can do that from some of these tips back to the staff, or sense check yourself. Have we got 2FA on? Have we done this? And just allocate that sort of diary time as part of your overall business planning for the next kind of, you know, hopefully, it's hard to say how long it will last in the short term, but, you know, now, to make sure you're okay.
But I think going forward, it's just getting that practice, dedicating that bit of time during the day, that week.
Yeah,
you on top of it, and it's just to make it as this is what you do on a regular basis. So
Yes.
it's a good time to start practicing that methodology and getting it right. Okay, there's some really, really good points there. I think what's quite good about this is that people can play this back and have another chance to listen to it and also pick up on these points, because there's a lot of good detail in that. Just moving on a wee bit now, we've got the next question, which is how IQ and IT have helped to lower licensing costs for furloughed staff. I think, Kat, you're going to answer this one.
Yes, we've been working with our clients, obviously, after the initial setting everyone to work from home, the realization of, okay, some of us don't have anything to actually do. What do we do? Government coming up with sort of rescue of furlough 80% wages. So a lot of our clients have been doing so, and we have been helping them lower the costs of their licensing. Microsoft is offering 6 months trial on the E1 license, which provides email license together with the online office. And that just means that it gives you sort of time for people to be off and then come back, and they can be converted back to whichever license they've been using before. It saves a bit of money, especially if people have the sort of more expensive packages from Microsoft, and every little helps. One of the other things we also do, not only for our clients, is to review licenses in use, because a lot of people sort of don't notice or don't go and disable or notify us straight away that someone has left. So things which could be done with people which have left the business is convert their emails into shared mailboxes, which then means that other paid mailbox users can access these. The email continues to flow in, and there is no charge for the license.
Okay, very good.
I actually saw this sort of applicable just before it all went 28 days later, really, because we were speaking to this business, and still are, that, you know, coming across, and they had got rid of users within the business, but they didn't understand, for example, there was a shared mailbox that they convert the mailbox to, which has no cost, and there was quite a few there that they wanted to keep that mail flowing in, you know. And as an IT professional, you obviously understand straight away, or maybe you've come across shared mailboxes, but a lot of people haven't, you know, and that saved them money off the bat. Also, reviewing your licenses and understanding your licenses can be challenging. I mean, Microsoft's products alone, depending on what suite you're going for, it's fantastic. It's constantly changing and evolving for the positive, but sometimes they're adding stuff and, you know, things like that, and it is hard to navigate. So, you know, review your licenses for a cost, use that shared mailbox, and to repeat what Kat said, really, for some of the staff that maybe have left the business, the shared mailbox, but for the ones that have been furloughed, employ, say, if you're on Office 365, as an example, this license, which will allow you to remove that license cost for up to 6 months, to just sort of allow them to continue to get stuff, because I believe they're allowed to, you know, monitor emails with HR and stuff like that, as opposed to actually do work. So it's a perfect stopgap to lower money within the business, or outgoings, and you know, still have functionality.
I think it's a very good observation. Again, we were saying that if for maybe a small business, 1 to 3 or 5 people, there will be some degree of savings. But if you had a much larger business, there's considerable saving there in the licenses. And I have to say, the one thing which we always notice from the Chamber is that what's always appreciated in your invoices is that it's a clear line regarding license fees. And actually, it's a very good note in terms of just having that set aside in terms of the costs, the benefits and whatever of that licensing line. So it was really good that you've noted that, and actually there is that offer to that you can help people in that furlough situation. It works both ways, so that's really, really good. So Kat, you've got a few areas which you are wanting to you just want to kind of promote in terms of how you can continue or help with businesses, haven't you, here?
Yeah, so what we're offering is the 2 months free backup for Office 365 and SharePoint. Obviously, always important, especially with people working in different places. They might accidentally delete it. They might not realize till a month later that they've deleted something. And depending on what redundancies policies you have set on Office 365, deleted items get purged. So you might lose that item. It might have been several people's hours of work which got wiped. So that's something we can do. Backup and remote working review. We are happy to have a meeting one-to-one with people and just have a look and check is the backup working and correct? Is the way they set up for remote working? Could there be perhaps some quick improvement they can do? And obviously the license cost audit. What I was going to add to the license cost audit is it's not only saving money, but also from a security perspective, disabling users who leave is really crucial, because that is the point where people could sort of take advantage and take information to a competitor, or just have access to information they should no longer have access to.
Thank you. Paul, is there anything else you would like to say at this point?
Just seen a question from Sue, which I think hopefully we answered, Sue, which was with so many passwords, how do you remember them? Keeping a paper record is not very secure. And that is exactly, it's a great question, because that is answered by LastPass. You know, that very reason for people keeping paper or keeping a text file on their desktop, or an Excel file or a Word file, you know, unencrypted, which can be grabbed. So that is what the usability and use case is for LastPass, really. You know, and
it is a simple process. It's a simple program to. It's not intimidating to use, is it?
It's really not. No, and there are others. There's Dashlane and goodness, I can't remember a few. And I do usually find that it is down to sort of user preference sometimes. And of course, there's different tiers. There's a free one which has certain tiers, going up to a paid version which has control sets for a business to its users. So for example, you know, you can force everyone to have two-factor authentication. So things like that, and kind of control sets to make sure they're adhering to correct stuff. You know, and that's for larger user bases and things. So yeah, that was one question there. I don't think we've got really many others right now, so I don't know if anyone wants to. Well, hopefully so. Hopefully so. There is
excellent. I think really, from my perspective, I'd say that the three things which you would just drum to everybody would be to, one, make diary time for this.
Yeah.
Don't treat this as just, oh God, it's a bit of this. It really is fundamental to how you work, not just now, but going forward out of this period, is to make diary time. Just check these things, check the updates, look at the 2FA and the backups, and just make sure you pay attention to updates. This isn't just to make your machine run smoother. This is for your own security. Yeah. So I think that's,
if anyone is literally worried about anything, for us it's like, you know, knowledge first. We try and add value wherever we can. So if anyone genuinely has a question, there's no strings attached. Please just get in touch. We can do a call and we can help you out, just even if it's just to ease your mind, you know, because some people do feel this sort of stuff can make people feel anxious. It doesn't need to be. You can turn it to a positive and make what underpins your business, IT, stronger.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point. I don't think, I know sometimes I get intimidated by IT. I think it's just important, just forget about that, lose any degree of pride, and just come to you guys and say, look, this may seem like a silly question, but, and often it will not be a silly question. It'll actually be really relevant and very important item. So I think if in doubt, pick up the phone, drop you an email, and I know you guys will do a great job to help them out. I really want to thank you, Kat, thank you, Paul, and thank you for your team. You work incredibly hard for the Chamber and for a lot of people in Kingston. If you do have any further questions, if you want to get in contact with Kat at kat.damcova@iqandit.uk. I think I've got that right. Was I, Kat?
Yep.
And also at ourselves at info@kingstonchamber.co.uk. We will be making this available up on the Chamber website. Thank you for listening in. Thank you, Kat. Thank you, Paul. Keep going with your butterfly decorations. And, I'm sure we will be reviewing this as we come out of this whole process. So look after yourselves, and thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks to Jess, our moderator, as well. Thanks, Jess.
Thank you, Jess.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.